After 11 months of the release, it's finally here. The Secret of the Mimic VR port has finally reached its launch. But was it worth waiting this long for just another way to play the game? And is it worth buying a new VR headset? I'll be answering those questions in this video. I've played all the endings in VR to make a good and fair review on this port. I'll tell you which parts I really liked playing in VR and which ones I didn't like. I will also mention all the bugs and glitches I found in my playthrough and tell you if they ruined my experience. This port has taken a long time to release. Like I said, it took 11 months. So for that logical reason, I'll be a bit strict on this review. But before I judge the VR port, I first want to talk about the drama that happened these last 3 weeks with Steelwool. I find this very important to talk about because it had a lot of impact on the VR port for Secret of the Mimic. If you've already heard about the drama and don't really care about my opinion on that, then skip to this timestamp to watch the VR review. So why did it take so long for Steelwool to release the VR port for Secret of the Mimic? Well, we still have no clue why. Steelwool never told us the reason for the delay. They silently pushed back the VR port by asking PlayStation to delete the hashtag PlayStationVR2 on their post. Many fans asked Steelwool why PlayStation removed that hashtag, but they refused to answer. It was only on an interview video with Dauko that Steelwool answered this question. They simply told Dauko that they would delay the VR port, because it was not finished. Then after the release of Secret of the Mimic, they were dead silent about the VR port. A half year later, they released the game on Xbox and Nintendo Switch, but they still had no updates on the VR. On February the 11th, they finally noticed the VR port, with a message that Secret of the Mimic VR would come out on spring. Then later on, they made small gameplay trailers with a release date calling out April 28. But when the date arrived, fans found out that this release date only counted for the PlayStation release. The PC players needed to wait an extra 2.5 weeks. This caused a lot of anger in the community and they blamed Steelwool for their weak communication with the fans. And I agree with that. I was quite disappointed when I heard the PC's delay. I normally don't have any hate towards Steelwool, and I think they do a great job on their new FNAF games. But this problem could have easily been avoided if they just communicated a lot better with the fans. Luckily they have learned from this mistake and promised to be better with the communication. After the 2-week promise of releasing the VR port on PC, they told the community that they still needed a few days to release the port. They also neatly stated in that message what the reasons were why the VR port still had to be delayed. I only would have liked to see this post a bit earlier, since they posted this on the last day of the 2 weeks. But if they keep communicating like this, I think the fanbase will be much more nicer towards Steelwool. Okay, it's now time to dive in the VR port of Secret of the Mimic and give you my review on this port. This whole VR port has the exact same gameplay as the original flat mode, so there are no new added content in this port. The game starts in a driving van. You can drive this van to the left and right, and because you're now in VR, you can look around inside the van. I really like the way of driving the van in VR. It feels like you're actually driving a real car. Unfortunate, the hands are locked on the steering wheel, so you're not able to let go or interact with other things in the van. You are able to stick your head outside the window, which lets you look behind the van. Something that is new on the VR port is the small cutscene when you arrive at the factory. Instead of looking at the top of the van, you're now inside the van and driving it to the parking lot. When I finally was able to move my hands around, I noticed that I couldn't make a fist or point my hand. Normally Steelwool adds these small animations in their VR games, but this time it wasn't there. Interesting to know is that you will never see this big part of the data diver throughout the game again. If you upgrade or give the data diver to M1, you only give the handle. The data diver itself is just completely gone. You also don't see it on your left side where it's supposed to be hanging on, so that's a bit weird. When I entered the facility, my game started to lag very much, with huge lag spikes. This made me scared that the game would run like this the whole time, but luckily this only happened on this part of the game. It's probably because the map of the factory needed to load in. After the welcome show was done, I had to interact with a few things to move on, like this handle next to the octopus and charging up the generator. This worked quite well in VR. Sometimes my hand didn't have a good grip on the handle, but it was nothing to worry about. When I interacted with the PC, I had to use the buttons on the bottom of the screen. It was quite interesting to see this. We always saw those buttons on the PC, but could never interact with them, so apparently they were purely there for the VR port. When upgrading the data diver, a small console pops out of the machine. This lets you press the buttons to go up, down or select. Also, I don't know if this is true, but when I played these small minigames for upgrading my data diver, I noticed that the arrow moved a bit slower than normal. It could be that Steel will change this, because it's quite hard to watch 2 things at a time. When I did the first lava puzzle in VR, I was a bit confused on where I needed to grab the puzzle pieces to rotate them. You could only grab them with these small dots that are sticking out. I must say that these lava puzzles are a lot more annoying in VR. The tracking on my VR controllers aren't the best, which caused the pieces to rotate a lot faster. Most of the time I overshot the rotation of the pieces, so I prefer these puzzles in platform mode over the VR port. My first interaction with the Mimic didn't go so well. Because I have to physically throw the mouse to distract the Mimic, I have to make a good throw. But I wasn't really good at this. I threw the mouse only 2 meters in front of me, so after sneakingly grabbing another mouse, I could give it another try. This time I had a good throw and could make it to the door. Now I ran to the elevator to meet Jackie. Most of the time when you play a VR game, you get surprised how big everything really is. But I didn't have this feeling with Secret of the Mimic. Most suits and animatronics didn't look that big, except for 2 characters, Jackie and Big Top. I got quite scared when I first saw Jackie pop out of his box. I even accidentally dropped the crank. Speaking about the crank, there's a small bug that the chain doesn't move when rotating the crank. After reaching the room with Digityper and seeing how small this robot really is, I charged the generator and started Jackie boss. Again, Jackie was quite huge in this cutscene. I did try to give him the data diver by throwing it towards him, but he didn't seem to care. So if bargaining didn't work, I only had one option left, running away. The whole chase scene with Jackie was really fun to do in VR. It adds another level of scariness and makes the whole chase more intense. Especially the part where you have to pull the levers. I didn't feel like I was fast enough. Also the section where you drop the garage door on top of Jackie was very nerve-wracking. It took so long till the door closed on him. This whole Jackie fight was great and is definitely one of my favorite parts in VR. It worked surprisingly very good. The next part was very fun to do in VR was repairing the elevator. Because now you are physically pressing buttons, rotating the crank and removing the elephant head. It makes you feel like a real mechanic. Basically every interaction with a lever or puzzle was just very satisfying and fun to do in VR. It gives you that extra feeling of being in this world. Okay, now I'll go over to the most horrible part in VR, the Big Top showroom. Now you may wonder, why is this the most annoying part in the game? Well, it's not the minigames themselves. They were quite fun to do. I could even pick up 2 balls and throw them at the same time. This is of course not possible in flat mode. The reason why this part is so horrible in VR is because of the late input to hide in a locker. To get inside the locker, you have to point at it and press the confirmation button. But in VR that can be quite tricky to do. Sometimes I ran too close to the locker, which made the indicator go away. Also, if I pressed the confirmation button once, nothing happened. I had to spam the button to get in the locker. But the most annoying thing with these lockers is that Big Top can still jump scare you while you're about to get inside. This hiding mechanic with these lockers doesn't work as good as the flat mode version. Normally I always make a run for it towards these lockers, but that's just impossible in VR. Another thing I found quite annoying is guessing how wide I am in VR. It's hard to tell if you can squeeze between 2 mannequins. Furthermore, I didn't find any bugs at this part. But my brother did find a weird bug. He went inside the showroom, then left the room for a moment, and when he came back, he heard the Big Top music box twice. Now the chase with Big Top was one of the highlights in Secret of the Mimic VR. It was an intense and enjoyable way of escaping from Big Top in VR. Seeing this gigantic animatronic in his true form was so awesome. Every time when he slammed the ceiling with his gigantic crane arm, I jumped in the air from fright. Especially the part where you crawl between this small room. Those arms coming out of nowhere makes this part so intense. Then the last sequence with all the mannequins that gets placed by Big Top was also very fun to do in VR. It was so nerve-wracking to avoid all those mannequins while Big Top keeps destroying the place. You can see how scared I was by looking at my shaking hands. This was definitely the best part of Big Top, not the one with the showroom. I did however got a small annoying bug in this chase. Whenever you try to stick your head inside a wall, your screen turns static. But this also happened in the chase while I didn't stick my head inside a wall. And it was not only the chase, it also happened on other parts throughout the game. It was not that annoying because it only appeared for a second, but still we could definitely take a look into that. After the Big Top chase, it was time to build the Captain Springlock suit inside the workshop. A very clever thing that Steel added to the VR port is that you can only grab the animatronic parts with both hands. It doesn't allow you to take the part with one hand. When grabbing a part for the first time, I did have an issue that the part kept spinning around. The foot constantly came in front of my face, which made it really hard to see. Luckily, this only happened on the first part. I guess I didn't have a good grip on the leg. Another issue I came across the workshop is that the Mimic got stuck behind the prototype elephant suit. He couldn't free himself, even if he knew where I was. But beside these issues, I found this part very enjoyable. It's just a simple game where I grab parts and try to distract the mimic, which I really like. When I entered the suit, you can see that the point of view is very far to the left. But this didn't happen in VR. For some reason, when you record VR gameplays, most of the time the point of view is not the same as what the player sees. So this is not an issue in VR, it's just a recording. When I encountered the mimic in my suit, I found out that you can't get too close to the mimic. Whenever you touch him with your face, the screen becomes static, which is quite annoying. After the first meeting with Tiger Rock, it was time for the puppet show. Shooting the targets in VR is much easier than platform mode. In VR, you have a much better aim. After waving very friendly towards Foxy, I figured something out. When shooting your arm cannon, you don't have a reload time. So how fast you spam the shoot button, how fast the gun shoots. You can see the difference on my gameplay and the gameplay from my brother. My brother shooted a lot faster than I did. There was one annoying bug in this puppet show. Sometimes you hear the sound effect of a pirate puppet shaking in front of you, while there isn't even a puppet. This got me quite confusing and made me scared that I would get jump scared out of nothing. Luckily that didn't happen. But it is a big problem, since I even heard the puppet sound while I met Dollie. Eventually it did stop, so I didn't have to quit and restart the game. In the Dollie cutscene, you're now able to look around more. You can now even see Dollie's knees sticking out of her skirt. Something I wanted to know is if the mimic was inside Dollie. So I stuck my head inside Dollie, and surprise, there was no mimic to be found. It was time to open the big door towards the doll hospital, but I first need to avoid Dollie on the tracks. After getting jump scared by the mailbot and punching him to make sure he stayed dead, I inserted the cogwheel inside the door and opened it. By the way, Dollie's shoes were quite huge. I could easily fit my hands in there. After activating the generator, I quickly got inside the ventilation where Dollie for some reason thought she would also fit in. The recycling trash section inside the doll hospital was very fun. I didn't encounter any bugs here and it worked very good in VR. Also here, you could only grab the trash cubes with both your hands. I did get jump scared once because Dollie tricked me by opening a door that she didn't even use. So out of nowhere, she stood right next to me. After throwing Dollie inside a burning oven, it was time for the chase scene. This also worked really well in VR and I didn't encounter any bugs. My favorite part in the doll hospital is the part where you have to sneak past Molten Dollie. This, with VR, made the game very nerve-wracking. I really felt the tension here. Of course, the part where you have to destroy Dollie with the elevator was amazing. It was so cool to see Dollie on top of the elevator, and like I said before, pressing buttons and turning levers in VR is really satisfying. Also seeing the mimic crawl out of Dollie in VR looked so epic. The doll hospital was a great part and didn't have any bugs. Now around this part of the game, I became very motion sick. The problem with Secret of the Mimic VR is that you have to run around the building. You don't stand still like in Help Wanted. For people that are not used to play VR games all the time, like me, can get really sick of this. So if you want to play this game in VR, but are not used to play virtual reality games, I recommend that you often take breaks now and then. Also, I would recommend to play this VR game seated. If you're standing, you will get motion sick much faster. Back in the game, I found another bug. Every time you load into a new map of the building, your data diver tells you the game is loading. But sometimes when you arrive at the new part, the data diver still keeps loading, even though you're already there. It doesn't ruin your experience for the game, but it is quite annoying to see this loading screen constantly on your data diver. When I arrived at the warehouse, I figured something out. Because I'm in VR, I can now grab two things at the same time. So when looking for the puzzle pieces, I grab two of them, so that I can beat the section much faster. This part where you have to build your own obstacle course to get across the room was still boring in VR. It takes so long and it's not very fun. So after that boring part done, I tried to catch Tiger Rock, but I wasn't fast enough. Also unfortunate, Cleanofact doesn't respond when you try to pet him. Inside the admin wing, I tried to hide inside a locker to avoid Chica. As you can see, that didn't work so well. So I tried hiding in the corner, which worked much better for some reason. Because when she saw me, she turned back instead of killing me. Now normally in this part I make a run for it, which always works. But this time in VR it didn't work. Chica knocked over the furniture and killed me. So I had to do it a slow and sneaky way. After grabbing the last upgrade and avoid Chica by closing this door, I reached the most scariest part of the game. The Tiger Rock basement. I'm absolutely terrified of this part. So doing this in VR made me very uncomfortable. Something that is a bit weird on the Tiger Rock encounter in VR is the flashing image. It's much more stretched to fit inside the player's point of view. Just like I expected, this section was 10 times scarier in VR. It's so terrifying to find the lights while Tiger Rock hunts you down in the dark. Once I reached the maze part of the basement, I had to grab the store plushie. Instead of being on the right side of your screen, the plushie is now right in front of you. This made me quite uncomfortable because I couldn't stand this stupid stare of him. There is a small bug when you insert the plushie inside of one of those holders. The plushie doesn't fit nicely inside the star-shaped form. It sticks a little bit out of it. I also had this weird moment where I want to go through this door, but at the exact same time, Tiger Rock spawned inside of me and jump scared me. You can see it clearly when I pause the video. After going through the last maze, I finally reached the end and made it out of the basement. Even though I almost shitted my pants, this was definitely a great and enjoyable part of the game. It works so good and the VR port makes it even much scarier. It's now finally time to look into the endings. Starting with the basic ending where I give the data diver to M1. Like I said on the start of the review, instead of giving the complete data diver, you give the handle, which is kinda weird. Once I started the cutscene in my fan, I noticed I was very high inside the car. I could easily stick my head outside the ceiling. Now because you're in VR, you can check the back of the fan, which is not ideal for this ending, because the mimic should be back there. Of course when you look back there, there's no mimic to be found. So how will the mimic appear on the end of the cutscene? Well, Steve will put a simple transition with a black screen. Once you're able to see again, you've been faced towards the mimic. As you can see, the mimic isn't really looking at you. He's basically grabbing your chest instead of your head. The point of view from the player is just way too high in this ending. Inside the end credits I found a small funny detail. You can see that I'm stuffed inside the fretbar springlock suit, but I'm not able to move my hands. This is because my hands are stuck in the T-pose. By looking at the shadow in the back, you can see my hands move along with my head. Over to the Parachute.exe ending. The first thing that was very cool to see in VR is the huge platform that goes down while Broken Big Top tries to catch you. It wasn't hard at all, but seeing this huge animatronic above me made me quite nervous. Inside the prototype Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, everything went very easy. I noticed that the mimic was quite small when I stood next to him with my springlock suit. I honestly expected him a bit bigger. There's nothing that really stood out in VR at this part. It was cool to get inside the prototype Spring Bonnie and Fredbear suit, just to think that these characters have a horrifying past, or should I say future. After meeting Fiona, it was time to get inside Edwin's house. Once at the house, I collect all the old film reels, just like you would do in platform mode. I again used this trick to grab 2 films at the same time. It's a really handy trick in VR and spares a bit of time. I did have one small glitch at this part. When I tried to switch hands with the film reel, the object shot out of my hands and clipped through the ceiling. Luckily it went back to the ground. I was really scared that the film reel was gone into the void. There was also a small bug that I encountered. When I took out the first film reel, the game still thought it was inside the projector. So when I tried to put in the next film, I wasn't able to put it in. Once I clicked the button, I saw that the previous film was still playing. So to fix this, I had to put the old film back in and then grab it back out. Now it's time for the most fun part of this ending, the mimic chase. All the chases inside VR are just a blast to play. It feels so intense to run away from these characters, especially the mimic chase. The whole building catches fire and collapses while the mimic with his small minions still tries to kill you. It's so chaotic and intense in VR, which I really like. The end cutscene was a bit weird honestly. The fan moved so much to the left and right that sometimes the player's point of view went out of the fan. Especially when the mimic comes down and crashes the fan. When the fan is upside down, I noticed that the place of the crash was different than in platform mode. The car is much more rotated towards the fans. Also the point of view was really low in this fan. When the mimic lifted the car, I had to physically move my head up so that I didn't clip through the roof. But at least in this ending, we can finally see the complete data diver again. Something else that is kinda weird is that the mimic literally runs through the fence. He's clipping right through it. For the last ending, I had to go for the moon basement. Honestly, I didn't find this that scary. Yes, it's pitch dark, but whenever Moon shows up, you see a huge shining light bulb running towards you. I also found this part quite annoying, because when you plug in the star plushie in its holder, Moon starts guarding that plushie, so it's quite hard to get it back. Once done with Moon, I had the glitch permission, which allows me to do the last ending. I first need to collect all the cartridges to start the bedtime story. While collecting the cartridges, I had one scary encounter with the mimic. When I opened the door, the mimic stood right in front of it. Luckily I was fast enough to walk away from the door, but this really scared me. Once all the cartridges has been found and plugged in, it was time to enter David's bedroom. I placed the Tiger Rock plushie on the stand and started the ending. It was very cool to see the mimic charging up to you and then struggle to not think like David. I really had the feeling that the mimic was so close to killing me. Also in this ending, the mimic is much taller than the player, which I really like. It makes the mimic more menacing and scary. Once the mimic couldn't move, I inserted the glitch formation inside of him and saw how he shrunk and became David. I even gave him a pat on the shoulder for being so well behaved. I honestly find this the only good VR ending, because this ending doesn't take place in a cutscene. The other endings weren't greatly optimized for VR, and the point of view were just way too off. And that concludes my whole review on Secret of the Mimic VR. In summary, I find the VR port very good. I didn't come across any bugs that ruined my experience, only small minor glitches. If I could change one thing on this VR port, I would nerf Big Top's showroom. Or make it that Big Top can't jump scare you while you're about to get inside a locker. It was a very annoying part in VR. But other than that, the whole gameplay was very fun and enjoyable to play. I did get very motion sick when I played this in VR, but I don't think I can blame the game for that. I'm not used to play VR games, so I get motion sick very fast. Especially if you need to run around the place and don't stand still like in Help Wanted. However, my brother is used to play VR games, and he told me he didn't have any motion sickness, only a small headache. Now I did saw a lot of negative comments on this VR port. Many people told Steelwool that this VR port is trash and didn't run at all. I have no idea where these people got these complaints from. The game was fine and didn't have any huge problems. I wonder if these people play on a PC with just the minimum requirements for VR, because there's no way that this game runs like trash. Of course, this is the internet, which comes with a lot of rage baits towards the community and Steelwool. It's just so annoying to see people being so ungrateful and angry. Now I have to say that I still find it weird that it took so long for the VR port. I can't see on the gameplay what made this wait so long. It feels like Steelwool just ignored the VR port for a while and then remembered that they still promised the community to release it. So I get that people get mad on this. For the next game I would announce a VR port if I was Steelwool. It is fun to play VR, but like I said, I'm not used to play VR games. It makes me very motion sick, so that means I would never touch this version ever again. I also think that this port takes a lot of time from Steelwool, which can cause a delay on their next game. I would rather want them to focus on their next game than to postpone it and make a VR port on their old game. Also, it was quite unfortunate that they didn't add any new content. I really expected a small update that announced the upcoming new FNAF game. Hopefully we get to see something on the upcoming State of Play. Fingers crossed for that. And that's my whole review on Secret of the Mimic VR. I had a blast playing this, and I can't wait to see what Steelwool's next game will be. This video took much longer than I anticipated. I wanted to make a 10-minute video on this, but it turned out to be much longer. I hope you enjoyed this review on Secret of the Mimic VR. If you did, why don't you like the video and perhaps subscribe to the channel.